All right, so welcome back. My computer just crashed while I was playing this game, but um, I'm gonna take back this way actually. But even though it crashed, since the game prior to this game, I had been interrupted and had to stop. We're just gonna pick it up where it left off, and I'm just gonna take back with the. I'd already talked about this in earlier before my computer crashed, but I think there's something to be said about taking with the F pawn here and being able to use the file and not having to worry about problems with my king since I have no knight over here to defend some key squares. And I'm not really worried about the safety of this pawn. There's just a lot of reasons. Oh, maybe actually I should have been a bit more concerned about the safety of this pawn. I forgot that he has the knight coming in here. So this was actually maybe a bit hasty. So that's unfortunate. I need to defend this pawn. I'll do so like this. I want to keep this square open. Yeah, so maybe f takes was a mistake. I just felt a bit rushed because getting back into the stream and I just disconnected. So potentially he could be trying to come here. But honestly, that wouldn't be the end of the world. Actually, this bishop kind of gets in the way of me protecting this pawn. So I'm going to use this opportunity to bring my knight forward since his knight left. If he goes bishop here, that would be interesting. Then maybe I just move my bishop out of the way. So he does go knight there. Don't have a lot of choice. I'm going to take that. We're going to see bishop takes. I think now is a good opportunity to play queen here. Keep this pawn protected and also stop his bishop from maybe relocating to a better diagonal, although I don't see where he really sits the bishop comfortably. Now I'm going to play my knight in here. We're going to tickle this pawn. Depending on how he defends it, like if he defends it with f4, then all of a sudden I have my knight coming into the e4 square. I can then reposition the queen, maybe double rooks. I have options here. I like the fact that my pawn is on this square, keeping his knight out. So I don't know if I have a great advantage here, but I don't dislike my position. His minor pieces are better than I wanted them to be, though. I'm not gonna flip through. We'll do a post-game analysis where I'll talk about the points of the opening that got covered over. Well, covered over is one way of putting it. Since I lost all the recording of the early game, we'll just talk about everything again in brief. But really unfortunate because the game right before this I also couldn't get a full recording of. So having these multiple games in a row, it's disappointing. So I'm not really sure what white is going to do here. White has some weak pawns. Like if my knight is on c5, also like now his rook is babysitting this pawn, which is not ideal. So all of my minor pieces will seem to have some sort of function. I just don't know if it will be enough to maybe start creating serious problems for white. And if I can't create any problems, then of course I can't create an advantage. So that's interesting. Bishop comes all the way back. I wonder why he would do that. maybe to play f4 without getting his, but he could still bring the bishop back. So that's interesting. I think I don't have much to think about. I think I don't think. I think my bishop needs to. Sorry, now I'm tongue twisted. My knight needs to come to c5, and if it comes to it, I think I can trade for the bishop and then just replace the knight. So it does come to it. Also notably here, this pawn's in danger. Can I go rook here? It's not out of the question. I really like this move. I mean, this pawn is just in huge danger now. And even if he were to come back, and in the situation where I wouldn't want to play rook here, I could always come here and be better for it. Having basically earned a free move of rook f7, a move I probably already wanted to play because doubling rooks was on my agenda. So this was kind of a no-brainer for me. I mean, his bishop doesn't have a great square to jump into, so even on d6, I think I have the possibility then of just taking and playing e5. So yeah, interested to see what he comes up with. Especially if my knight ends up on e5, there are a few tactics that I see potentially with... Okay, wow. He goes for this after all. Well, first of all, my options here. I have taking, takes, and e5 like I just mentioned, which seems pretty credible. Maybe he pins, but then I'd have rook here and then takes, so he doesn't. So the knight would have to move. Where would the knight move? f3 maybe? And I can come pick up the pawn. That seems... I mean, it looks pretty good for me. I also have taking here. Bishop takes and then rook here. Although I don't know why that would be better. Alright, I think takes. Push the pawn. His knight has to retreat now because I'm threatening rook e4, even if he were to pin the pawn to my queen. So he's pretty high rated. I don't think that we'll see that mistake. So the knight comes somewhere. Maybe to f3. Maybe... I mean, f3 is kind of a weak square as well. Because then my queen comes to e6 and I'm going to pick up this pawn. Sorry, when I say weak square, I mean that it's not going to be stable there because it has no pawn to protect it. So maybe keeping an eye on this pawn. This seems like a no-brainer. Let's collect this pawn. He might try to put pressure here, and I might have to bring my knight to b6 at some point to defend it. But that'd be alright. This is looking pretty good. Also, he has to start wondering about, like, if my rooks double, he could be in some serious danger of some checkmating nets. So his queen might have to keep looking at the g4 pawn or find some other way to protect it. So sorry if you can hear my creaking chair. Not the most stable chair. You can also hear my computer overclocking here. Something's happening with this computer. I don't know why it crashed. It might just be that the recording is too hard on it, which would be very unfortunate. So he does play rook here. So I think we just take. I can always play here. He doesn't have c4 because then I play d4. So he threatens this. I defend. I'm controlling the square. And now I might be preparing for rook takes pawn. I'm also preparing for doubling rooks and then rook f3. So there's a lot of things are going on. And none of them seem good for white. But it'd be great if I could take here first, move out of the way, and then push the pawn forward. I wouldn't have to worry about knight takes a5 ever, and then I could come back. Because if my rook gets on f3, it might get kicked away, and then maybe I have to deal with some problems. So it looks like the knight's coming here. So maybe this is a cue for rook here. At least it would make him think about his h3 pawn. And I can always take here. I want to see what he does. And for the moment, I don't have to worry about the a5 pawn. It also just feels very harmonious, like all my pieces have a function. He's getting lower on time too. And I've hardly taken any time at all, but I don't feel like my position's suffering for it. So I feel like now's a good time to take this. Maybe we'll see here. And then what? Maybe rook comes back here, I can push my pawn, I can start to make threats. So he's like putting some idea of pressure here. So what I'm thinking about right now is whether or not I have to defend this. How can I get in on this g4 square? Like already, I could play rook here, and then I'm quite seriously threatening to sacrifice the rook here and then bring my queen over and checkmate him. So, or at least something along those lines. He does have possibilities of defending. So I can't be overly ambitious. But it might make him think. What else can I do? I can start by going here also, I think. Rook f3, king g2, rook doubles. He attacks my rook. My rook is trapped. So maybe not. I could possibly play rook here, kick the knight away, and then come after the c pawn. That's not such a bad idea. And if he ever plays here, oh, maybe I don't have this anymore. Well, okay, so if he plays c4, I think I have knight takes c4. And even if queen takes, pawn takes, then I win this knight. So the knight's not on the best square for that tactic to occur. I mean, truthfully, I should have considered it before I moved my rook off of the defense. He's getting pretty low. Even with the 15 additional seconds, you don't want to be this low. Right, so I think I just take this. Take, queen takes, pawn takes, and then pawn takes, I guess, because I'm threatening here. So he doesn't have time, I think, to come after this pawn, because then this is winning. So let's go here. I'm going to do some very basic stuff with rolling my pawns forward. If he attacks me, I could just as easily play a waiting move, like rook f7, protect this, and then say, now what? So I don't have to calculate some sort of pawn race. Yeah, this pawn I'm not too concerned with. That is not an important pawn. So we're going to keep pushing forward. I mean, I'm also threatening something around here. So it's possible that if you were to take, I could just take on f2, and that makes things pretty awkward. Oh, that can't be the solution. I just go here. So it takes here, rook comes here, trade once, I go here. That's over. I'm now going to play a2. I can almost pre-move that. I mean, I think I can. So we won this game. So you didn't see the game in full, so let's take this to the analysis board. And let's also take this to the study. Okay. Maybe in a separate recap video, I'll cover the games that were missed. I'll throw that on. So the opening was a bit unusual. In the game before this one, I'd also played the Alekhine defense. And so I thought, since I couldn't showcase that game, I'll do this here. And this was my kind of, I'm not going to call it a pet line because I don't feel like I've put enough effort into it to claim any sort of ownership over it. Of course, it wasn't my idea or anything, so ownership might even be a strong word. But it's a sideline that I'm aware of, knight b6, and the idea that I have is going to be to play d5 rather than d6. Notice that d6 is the main move here. So we're opting for a different kind of structure. And I don't really care that it says this is an inaccuracy. I know it's not the best. The idea is to establish this kind of pawn structure that's similar to the French, which we could look at maybe by like e6, d4, maybe something like this. Notice that I'm aiming for a similar structure, but I want to remove my bishop prior to playing e6. So you can see that here, just something bishop to d3. I play bishop to g4. So my next move is likely going to be e6. Then I can have this very solid pawn structure with all the pawns on, or the central pawns on light squares, but my bishop isn't contained. So as you can see in the database here, this is actually a good moment for this move h3. And I mentioned this in the failed video attempt, but the idea is that bishop h5 is not so easy to play. It's what you'd want to play normally. You don't want to trade on f3, but you might have to because, okay, I'm going to put that in first because this will be the sub-variation, and this is the exact reason why. We lose control over e6, allowing white to sacrifice a pawn here. And you don't have much of a choice. If you play something like f6, like resolute to not accept the sacrifice, well then this bishop is terrible forever. And you get something like this where still the bishop is, like this is going to be so hard to fix in the future. This pawn is a nuisance. White is happy that this pawn is gone and that no pawn can kick a piece back from here. You just sit this knight here forever. So it doesn't surprise me to see that although both of these players were lower rated than their opponent, like the two games where this was tried, I'm not surprised at all that white won both of them. So you kind of have to take here, not ideal, queen f3, and then you play e6, and you still have a very solid position where you're slightly worse, but black does okay. And you can see that in the statistics here. Black does okay. Looks like it's almost 50-50 in terms of wins and losses. So that was one of the ideas. But because he castled first, I played e6. Notice that, and I can, since there's no more games in the database, I can take that down. I don't ever have to worry about this anymore. So, of course, I shouldn't trade. I should keep this pin. And if he chases me around, well, he makes his king a little weaker. And I'd be much happier to trade for his strong light square bishop, which is a big attacking force on the king side. So, at this point, I played c5. And as I mentioned in that previous video, I started with c5 rather than maybe bishop e7 because if he ever takes on c5, well, maybe I want to take back in a single move rather than wasting a move and then having to take back. And I was still a little surprised that he actually followed through on d takes c5. Often, especially after the knight comes to d2, like White's doing that with the idea of meeting c5 with c3, but this just wasn't what White's idea was. And so it might have been possible even to play knight to d7 to recollect. Oh, not like that, like this, but that's a lot of wasted time. So bishop takes c5 for now, queen e2. Fair enough. Okay, maybe this pawn will be weak in the future. Maybe he's just waiting to see what I do. Wasn't really sure that this was his highest priority, but okay. Knight c6 and c3. c3 surprised me a little. I think his idea is that he wanted me to never have knight to b4. His bishop's very important still. The problem is that, well, I wouldn't say problem. I'm never worried about the strength of this bishop because, again, I can always trade for it. And I'm not really sure what I was going to say. Well, I was going to say that he missed pretty much all these opportunities to play c4. And I've caught up in development. He doesn't have time to bust me open. But maybe in the future he does want to play c4 just to open up the e4 square for his knight and maybe take advantage of this d6 square. That's something, if he can trade off the dark square bishops, it's a very typical motif to have a knight hop into d6, and it's just difficult to deal with if I don't have an easy way of counteracting the knight. So I castled here. Apparently knight to d7 was best. It's kind of like splitting hairs, or at least I thought it was. I didn't see a reason not to castle at this point, but I think I said this already. It's very likely that the knight comes back to d7, even though it goes on this fantastic journey, just to end back up at d7. The idea, the whole concept, as I already said, is that I'm willing to give up some initiative in the opening with the intention of freeing my bishop, and then if I can solidify into the middle game, catch back up in development, almost like I have, then the time wasted it becomes pretty much moot, and I just have a much easier game than in the French defense with equalizing and then maybe pushing. So this might have been better because it comes with tempo, and we forced White's hand because it's not easy for White to defend this pawn. It's funny that g4. Oh, it's not. No, this makes sense. I was about to say if knight here, then very likely we could maybe insert this move, and then there's just no way to defend this. Even if he takes back like this, is this possible? Probably not, right? Because he takes on c5. Then my knight becomes overloaded. Okay, but even then, maybe I drop back here. Defends, my queen comes out. I would play this game. We might castle queenside, and his king is just super weak. So yeah, so knight d7 is a good move for concrete reasons, not because the move order matters. Like, these were all moves that were on the agenda, but I should have noticed that it was a tempo move, and then I would have considered it more strongly. Yeah, b4, I mentioned this as well in the previous video, that surprised me. This pawn becomes backwards and a huge target, and I'm not really sure. I mean, he doesn't make my bishop that much worse. My whole position's pretty solid, so I feel like he's giving me more squares to use in a4, and I think this is where the video picks back up. So after a5, b5, knight b8. So notice that these squares are easily accessible by my knights. G4, yeah, this is pretty much where the video picks back up. G6. F takes G6 would have been a good move, I think, if I'd remembered that he had knight to D4 and that this was going to be hard to defend. It would have been good if he didn't have this, if maybe the pawn was on D4. Because I think if I recall, right as I was talking about the merits of F takes G6, which made more sense in previous positions, I was coming to the realization that he could attack me. So, and in this case, yeah, H takes. There's just very little chance that he'll have any of the advantages of, especially with G4 played, of organizing a knight and queen here to attack me. It'd be easy for me to as well to defend in that unlikely event. He's castled here, so it would take him a number of moves to organize even just some pressure here. And that's a lot of moves. So yeah, as always, you should take back in 99% of cases towards the center. I just thought this was an exception, and I was wrong. If I noticed this, I would have never played, but I was a bit hasty. So knight d4, queen c8. I saw a little drop here in the computer's evaluation. I'm not really sure what it would suggest me playing otherwise. Maybe queen d7. But I wanted to reserve that for the knight if possible. But I guess I have to do something about this anyways before I can interpose my knight with my queen's defense. So okay. So here I take the space he left behind. Yeah, and this is a bit much. I thought it was more interesting to try to trade bishops first because then it's harder to defend. So yeah, this is now looking pretty good. Bishop a3 allows rook f4. So yeah, rook f4 was a good move. Bishop d6. Yeah, apparently I didn't even have to take. I can just ignore it for another move. I'm just staring at the position here. It's really hard to work out the details here and without really diving into the position. I'll play through the sample and that it gives. But I guess it's preparing defense of e6 before taking. But you play e5 anyways, so I felt like this was still okay. It's not a huge difference. And the computer's evaluation rises again after a few moves. So I don't dislike what I did at all. I think even in a maybe serious over the board game, I wouldn't criticize it. Knight to b3, queen e6. And so yeah, I've picked up the pawn. It's pretty clear that he wants to play c4, so I stopped that. Not just c4, that I have to defend the pawn on d5. So knight b6. And I guess I could have taken the pawn on the previous move. Yeah, and c4 here was suicide. I think he was getting pretty desperate, and if if this knight wasn't on b6, it would make a lot of sense, maybe, because I'd be in a bit of a bind, not being able to play my intended response d4 because there'd be a fork on me. Although you could suggest that I could bring my queen back to c7 and pin the pawn to the queen, so I don't lose the knight. But even so, like, there's no excuse for trading down like this. And yeah, definitely taking with the pawn. I mean, just these connected pawns, that's going to be... Yeah, he's not even going for... This is a much more important pawn. I mean, he figured that he could win this pawn for certain, but... I mean, it's a drop in the bucket. He would much rather try to win this pawn and then have his own threat here. And so the rest is just a matter of pushing my pawns. And everything's unstoppable. And yeah, even mate in 10 is announced by the computer. So little slip up here and there. Um, yeah, with my f takes g6, but this is the kind of progression I like to see in my game. Just a solid, slow outplay. So once again, sorry that I failed not only in the video recording of this video. I'll have to investigate why my computer froze up like that, but also the failure to capture this game without the interruption. So thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned something from this. I'll consider doing a video on the games that got missed. There were a couple early games that got missed before I was confident in my recording setup. Maybe I'll cover them all together in some sort of recap video. But for now, I'll see you in the next game.